Hey there, Pokemon trainer! How's it going? Minebuild here, and today I'm going to show you how to use Blastoise in competitive battles. If you're into strategy and want to step up your competitive Pokemon game, stick with me in this video. I'll break down my analysis of this awesome Pokemon and highlight the best moves to get the most out of it in single battles. And hey, I want to hear from you too. What moveset would you use on Blastoise? Drop your suggestions in the comments. If you enjoy this competitive Pokemon analysis, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to support the Minebuild channel. It really helps the channel grow on the platform. And if you love Pokemon and also play Minecraft, stick around until the end. I've put together a playlist with amazing Pokemon builds in Minecraft, all created by me. Now, let's get started and make Blastoise shine in battles. Blastoise made its debut in the Kanto region as Pokemon number 9 in the National Dex. It evolves from Squirtle, the first stage, to Wartortle, the second stage, and finally into Blastoise, its fully evolved form. It's a pure water type, and that simple typing actually gives it some very clear strengths and some very clear weaknesses in competitive battles. According to the Pokédex, Blastoise stands at 1.6 meters tall and weighs 85.5 kilograms. Its total base stats add up to 530, spread across HP, 79, attack, 83, defense, 100, special attack, 85, special defense, 105, and speed, 78. When you look at these stats combined with its water typing, Blastoise can actually be used in two very different ways. The first, and in my opinion, the most consistent, is taking advantage of its solid defense and special defense, along with the support moves it learns, to function as a bulky utility Pokemon that supports your entire team. Blastoise has the durability to stay on the field, remove hazards, spread pressure, and control momentum. In single battles, that kind of reliability is extremely valuable. But there's another option. Thanks to the addition of Shell Smash, a powerful setup move, Blastoise can also take on an offensive role. Shell Smash sharply boosts its attack, special attack, and speed, allowing it to transform from a defensive tank into a legitimate offensive threat. After one boost, it can pressure teams using special attack, or even a mixed approach depending on your build. Now, this offensive strategy becomes even more dangerous when we're talking about Mega Blastoise. The added power and ability synergy push it to another level. However, even regular Blastoise can absolutely function as an offensive setup sweeper if supported correctly. That said, I personally see the support role as the more consistent and ideal way to use Blastoise in competitive singles, but we're going to break down both possibilities. Blastoise has two possible abilities, and which one you choose really depends on the role you want it to play. Its standard ability is Torrent. When Blastoise drops below 1/3 of its maximum HP, its water-type moves get a 50% power boost. And remember, because Blastoise is a water type, it already benefits from Stab, which is another 50% boost. So when Torrent activates, those water moves hit significantly harder. This ability clearly leans toward a more offensive playstyle. If you're running Shell Smash or trying to clean late game, Torrent can help secure key knockouts once Blastoise is weakened. Now, its hidden ability is Rain Dish. Rain Dish restores 6.25% of Blastoise's HP at the end of each turn while Rain is active. That might not sound like much at first, but over multiple turns, that passive recovery adds up, especially on a bulky Pokemon. This ability fits much better on a defensive or support-oriented Blastoise, particularly on rain teams where the weather is consistently active. Now, something very important needs to be clear here. For Blastoise to truly function as an offensive threat, it needs to use Shell Smash. There's really no shortcut. Blastoise doesn't naturally have a high base speed stat. So in most situations, you're going to take a hit before you can even set up. That means you have to survive the first attack in order to activate Shell Smash. After using it, your attack, special attack, and speed all double, which is huge. But your defense and special defense drop. That's why White Herb is such an important item here. It immediately restores those defensive drops back to neutral, allowing you to keep your bulk while gaining the offensive boosts. Once boosted, you're sitting at +2 attack, +2 special attack, and +2 speed. That's when Blastoise becomes dangerous. And depending on how much damage you took while setting up, you might already be below 1/3 HP, which activates Torrent. At that point, your water-type moves become even more powerful. But notice what has to happen for this to work. You need a safe opportunity. You need to survive the hit. You need the setup turn. And ideally, you want Torrent activated. That's a lot of conditions. On the other hand, if you use Blastoise as a support Pokemon, it works immediately from turn 1. You can remove hazards with Rapid Spin. You can spread burns with Scald. You can pivot and control momentum. No setup required. And that's why the support role is generally more consistent in competitive singles, even if the Shell Smash set has a much higher ceiling. Going back to Blastoise's base stats, you can clearly see how it's built. Its HP is moderate, not bad, but not outstanding either. Its attack and special attack are underwhelming compared to most offensive threats in competitive play. Its speed is also considered low by modern standards. In most matchups, Blastoise is not moving first without setup. But then you look at its defense and special defense, and that's where it stands out. Both defensive stats are solid, especially its special defense. That natural bulk is exactly why the support role makes so much sense for it. Now let's talk about weaknesses. Because it's a pure water type, Blastoise only has the standard water type weaknesses, which means it takes double damage from electric and grass type moves. That's it. Just 2 weaknesses. Everything else normal: fighting, poison, ground, flying, psychic, bug, rock, ghost, dragon, dark, and fairy hits it for neutral damage. On the defensive side, Blastoise resists fire, water, ice, and steel, taking only half damage from those types. So when you break it down, 2 weaknesses, 4 resistances. Everything else is neutral. It's not an extreme defensive typing, but it's stable and reliable. Now, looking at Blastoise from an offensive perspective. Because it's a pure water type, its water moves deal super effective damage against fire, ground, and rock types. Against normal, electric, ice, fighting, poison, flying, psychic, bug, ghost, dark, steel, and fairy types, it deals neutral damage. However, there are 3 types that resist water moves: water, grass, and dragon types. Against those, Blastoise's main stab moves will only deal half damage. Now let's talk about the moves I selected for Blastoise, options that can work for the offensive and the support versions. Starting with its water-type special attacks. Hydro Pump is the strongest option. The downside? Accuracy. It can miss at critical moments. If you prefer consistency, Surf is the safer alternative. Slightly less power, but 100% accuracy. In competitive singles, reliability often wins games. For a more supportive approach, Scald becomes extremely valuable. It carries a burn chance, and burning a physical attacker can completely shift the momentum of a match. Ice Beam is essential in many builds. It helps deal with grass and dragon types, 2 of the main types that resist water. Without ice coverage, those Pokemon can wall you. Then we have fighting type coverage. Aura Sphere is a special attack option that never misses, giving you reliable damage against steel types and certain bulky threats. On the physical side, there's Body Press, and this one is very interesting. Instead of using Blastoise's attack stat, it calculates damage based on its defense. Since Blastoise naturally has solid defense, this move can be surprisingly effective on more defensive builds. For utility, we have Rapid Spin. This is one of the biggest reasons to run support Blastoise. It removes entry hazards like Stealth Rock, Spikes and Toxic Spikes, and it even gives a small speed boost after use. That's huge in singles. Then of course, Shell Smash. This is the move that completely changes Blastoise's identity. It boosts attack, special attack, and speed by 2 stages. And finally, Rain Dance. Setting Rain not only boosts your water-type moves, but it also activates Rain Dish if you're running the hidden ability. This creates synergy between offensive pressure and defensive recovery. Now we're going to break down how these moves fit into each version of Blastoise, the support build and the offensive Shell Smash build, and when you should choose one over the other. Now let's talk about option 1, defensive support Blastoise. For this version, we're running Rain Dish as the ability. Rain Dish restores 6.25% of Blastoise's HP at the end of every turn while Rain is active. That passive recovery adds up very quickly on a bulky Pokémon. And remember, while Rain is active, Water-type moves deal 50% more damage, and Fire-type moves deal 50% less. So Rain not only improves your offense, but also indirectly strengthens your defensive positioning. All IVs are set to 31 for maximum optimization. Technically, attack doesn't need to be perfect on this set. But if you want to squeeze a little more damage out of Rapid Spin, you can just keep all IVs at 31. The EV distribution focuses on maximizing HP first, to increase overall bulk. Then we fully invest in defense. The remaining EVs go into special defense. The idea here is clear, this Blastoise is meant to function as a physically defensive support Pokémon. We're running a bold nature. That boosts defense and lowers attack, which is fine, because attack is not the focus of this build. Now let's look at the moves. Scald is your primary stab water move. Base power 80, solid damage, but the real value is the 30% burn chance. If you burn a physical attacker, their attack stat is cut in half. That alone dramatically increases Blastoise's ability to wall physical threats. Body Press is extremely interesting on this set. It's a fighting type move with 80 base power, great coverage against steel types, which are very common and often difficult to break. But here's the key, Body Press does not calculate damage based on your attack stat. It uses your defense stat instead. Since we heavily invested in defense, this move becomes surprisingly strong. So now your defensive stat also becomes an offensive tool. Rapid Spin is one of the main reasons to use support Blastoise. It removes hazards from your side of the field, Stealth Rock, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, all cleared in one use. And on top of that, it gives you a 50% speed boost after use. That extra speed can occasionally help you move first in key turns, especially against slower defensive Pokémon. Finally, Protect. Protect allows you to stall for one turn. If the opponent is burned, that's one extra turn of burn damage. If Rain is active, that's one extra turn of Rain Dish recovery. You can use it to scout moves, waste PP, or simply regain momentum. Now let's talk about option 2, offensive special attacker Blastoise. For this version, we're running Torrent. Torrent boosts the power of your water-type moves by 50% when Blastoise drops below 1/3 of its maximum HP. Since this is a fully offensive build, the goal here is simple, maximize damage. Torrent fits perfectly into that plan, especially in late-game situations where Blastoise is already weakened but ready to sweep. All IVs are set to 31 for maximum optimization. Attack 4 doesn't really matter on this set. EVs are fully invested in special attack and speed. The remaining EVs go into HP. The goal is clear, hit as hard as possible and outspeed as much as possible after one shell smash. The nature is modest. That boosts special attack and lowers attack, exactly what we want for a pure special attacker. Now let's look at the moves. The main stab move is Hydro Pump. 110 base power, but only 80% accuracy. That means there's always a 20% chance to miss, and in competitive singles, that can matter. However, because this is your primary stab attack, you generally want the highest damage possible. After a Shell Smash boost, Hydro Pump hits extremely hard. If you prefer consistency over raw power, you can run Surf instead. Surf has 90 base power and 100% accuracy. Your choice depends on how aggressively you want to play. Next, Ice Beam. 90 base power, 10% chance to freeze. More importantly, it gives you crucial coverage. Water-type moves are resisted by Grass and Dragon types. Ice Beam hits both of those types super effectively. Then we have Aura Sphere. Fighting move, 80 base power, and it never misses. This move is excellent for hitting Steel types, which are very common in competitive singles. It gives Blastoise more complete offensive coverage. Now the move that makes this set work, Shell Smash. Shell Smash lowers your defense and special defense by 33.3%, but in exchange, it doubles your attack, special attack, and speed. However, the defensive drops can make you vulnerable. That's why we're running White Herb. White Herb activates immediately after you use Shell Smash, restoring your lower defenses back to neutral, but it only works once. Let's take a look at some other moves Blastoise can learn, especially considering its move pool up through Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. Even though we focused mostly on special and support sets, there are some physical options worth keeping an eye on. Starting with Aqua Jet. It's a water-type move, Stab, with 40 base power, but it has priority. That means it moves first regardless of Blastoise's speed. On certain builds, especially mixed or surprise sets, that priority can help pick off weakened opponents. Another strong option is Earthquake. Ground type, 100 base power, just pure, reliable damage. It gives you strong coverage against electric types that normally threaten Blastoise. Then there's Fake Out. Normal type, 40 base power, and it causes flinch on the first turn Blastoise hits the field. It can break focus sashes, disrupt setup, or create momentum early in the match. Flip Turn is another very interesting option. Water type, Stab, 60 base power. It works similarly to U-Turn, you deal damage and then immediately switch out. This is excellent for pivoting and maintaining momentum, especially on bulky support builds. For ice coverage on physical sets, there's Ice Spinner. 80 base power, and it removes terrain effects from the field. That added utility can matter in certain matchups. Then we have Liquidation. Water type, Stab, 85 base power, and it has a 20% chance to lower the opponent's defense. It's a strong physical stab alternative if you're not running a special build. If you want maximum raw power, there's Wave Crash. Stab, 120 base power, extremely strong, but it deals recoil damage equal to about 1/3 of the damage dealt. And finally, Ice Punch. 75 base power, 10% chance to freeze. Not as strong as Ice Spinner, but still a consistent physical coverage option. When it comes to additional special attack options, Blastoise's move pool isn't extremely wide, but there are still a few moves worth mentioning. First, Blizzard. Ice type, 110 base power, but only 70% accuracy, meaning there's a 30% chance to miss. It also has a 10% chance to freeze the opponent. However, if Snow is active, Blizzard becomes perfectly accurate. Then there's Dark Pulse. Dark type, 80 base power, with a 20% chance to cause flinch. Dragon Pulse is another option. Dragon type, 85 base power. Flash Cannon is a Steel type move with 80 base power and a 10% chance to lower the opponent's special defense by 1 stage. Now, Focus Blast. Fighting type, 120 base power, but only 70% accuracy. Since Blastoise already learns Aura Sphere, which never misses, Focus Blast is usually the less consistent choice. The power is higher, but the accuracy risk is significant. Let's talk about some status moves. Haze, Ice type, resets all stat changes on the field, both yours and your opponent's. This can completely shut down setup sweepers, but it also removes your own boosts, so timing is critical. Iron Defense, Steel type, sharply boosts your defense, doubling it. On defensive sets, this can synergize extremely well with Body Press. Aqua Ring, Water type, restores 6.25% of your HP every turn. Now we wait for Generation 10 to see if Blastoise gets new tools and maybe opens up new ways to be used in battle. I hope you enjoyed this analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.